Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And Tom, I want to talk about the polls. We have enough votes counted now, including those late votes from California, to make a few judgments. So let's begin with the RCP average. How do you think the RC average did in terms of anticipating the final outcome of the election?
Very good. We had, think of the 7 swing states, we had Trump winning 5 of the 7. We had Harris leading in 2 of them by less than half a percentage point. If you look at, on average, our averages were within 1.8 percentage points of the final outcome in every single one of these states. So that's pretty good performance. And then nationally, we had Harris up 0.1%, and obviously Trump's going to win the national popular vote by about 1.5 points. So again, 1.6 or so. It's pretty good nationally. So the polls weren't terrible this year. I mean, part of the reason is because, once again, these polls that the folks at the New York Times and Simon Rosenberg like to denigrate, right? Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Insider Advantage, all did really well. Very accurate.
They accuse them of being right-wing polls.
Correct. And for example, Trafalgar is definitely a Republican-leaning firm. Insider Advantage too, and Rasmussen, but they all did very, very well. Atlas Intel, who was the most accurate pollster 4 years ago, was unbelievably accurate this time. And the New York Times, by the way, New York Times Siena was atrocious. They had Harris winning 4 of the 7 swing states. They had 2 of them tied, and they had Trump winning Arizona, which he did. So they had Harris winning 274 electoral votes without winning Michigan or Pennsylvania, which is just preposterous. It turned out to be about as wrong as you could be. So,
and yet the Times criticized our average on the eve of the election.
Did. Yeah, that's right.
And said we shouldn't count these other polls, the polls that were right. We should count the polls they liked, the polls that were wrong.
Yes, 5 days before the election, they ran a hit piece on us saying, "Oh, these right-wing polls are distorting the averages, and RCP is getting talked about on social media, painting this distorted picture that Trump is leading and going to win in these swing states." And look, that's exactly what happened. And so I think our averages did better than any other average out there. And the reason for that is because, again, the averages are, well, there are 2 things. One is that they're only as good as the polls that go into them. And the other thing is, too, we don't massage the polls. We don't weight them. We don't futz with them at all. The numbers are just the numbers. And I think despite the fact that, some of our competitors are doing all this, have all these bells and whistles and black boxes and all this crap that they're doing, they end up actually making the numbers worse than making them better. And so that's why I think the RCP average continues to be the most accurate and the gold standard in the industry.
I think this is right, Tom. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, because you monitor these numbers in the week before that campaign on an hourly basis. But we have this no toss-up map, and you could look at, and that is, if you have to just choose whoever's leading there in our average, they get that state. And until about a few days before the election, maybe a week before, our no toss-up map had Trump winning all the 7 swing states that he carried. But then CNN came in late with poll in Michigan and Wisconsin, had Harris winning by 6 points in both those states, which tipped the average over. If it had not been for that CNN poll, we had all the states right. Am I wrong?
That's right. No, that's exactly right.
All right. I'm not trying to pick on CNN here.
Well,
but I'm trying to pick on the New York Times. Well, it's the New York Times. I'm waiting for my apology from the New York Times.
Oh, please, Carl. Come on.
You think I'm waiting in vain?
Yes, you're waiting in vain.
I want to ask, though, Tom, about this idea of weighting, just because I think it's a term we throw around, but I'd like to delve into it a little bit. I mean, you tell me if I'm right. We do not weight our polls. In other words, we take a straight average of the polls that we include. So there is a judgment involved in which polls go into the average. But once they're in their average, it's not like we say, oh, well, this one was more accurate last time, so we're going to put a little magic sauce on that and give it a little bit more emphasis, right? It's an average.
Correct. And some people, look, there are a dozen bells and whistles at some of these other organizations, 538, Nate Silver, Washington Post, New York Times, they put on, if a poll is more recent, it'll get more weight than one that's older. If it has more, has a bigger sample size or lower margin of error, it gets more weight than one that doesn't. Or in particular, if there are, quote unquote, house effects, if this pollster has, leans Republican or leans Democrat, then it's going to be given weight one way or another. I mean, there's 1,000 ways that these guys put their thumb on the scale and, mess with these numbers, and we just don't do it. I mean, we never have, we never will. And if you go back and look, our averages have been as accurate or more accurate every single time just by using a straight, simple average. And that's just how it is. I don't know what else to say other than, the keep it simple, stupid approach has served us very well.